Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining this inaugural first episode of The Power of Intentional Partnerships. This mini-series is a result of the CEPHR value of agility, right in the making. So we're streaming live today to LinkedIn and CEPHR's YouTube channel. So if you miss any parts or you want to share, you can head over to YouTube. Yes, we do actually have a YouTube. I'm just not that great at always marketing that, working on that agility, right? You can also catch up on Team Replay if you want to share this with others. We're so grateful you're here today. So my partner and guest today, I'm going to bring him up in a minute, Gil Cohen. We were discussing showcasing more of our work together, and we thought a live would be a great way to do that. So here we are. I'm honored today that I get to share the stage with Gil, and we're really grateful that you are here with us to do this. So really exciting, and I'm going to bring Gil up without further ado.
Hello.
Hey, Gil.
Hey, Tiff. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you? Yeah,
Good.
we have our CEPHR t-shirts on. We're representing.
I'm good. I'm good. How
Oh,
you doing?
God. Yeah, this is great. So Gil is founder of Employee Experience Design and brings so much talent and awesome to CEPHR. And I just felt like I had to showcase that. And so I invited him and he accepted to do this LinkedIn Live so we can talk about his great work, but also the work that we're doing together and intentional partnership, what it looks like to be partners and friends, and how do you make this all work? So we hope that that's valuable for you all. So Gil, do you want to tell us more about your talents and passions for what you do and why you do what you do?
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Like, look, any chance to have a chat with you, I'm going to take it. So whether it's live or not, I'm here. But a little bit about me. My name is Gil. I am a consultant out of the Greater Toronto area. I've been consulting other than for 2 years of my career. For my whole 21-year career, I've been doing consulting. My passion comes from the fact that for the first 16 years of my career, I was working small family business consulting around values, vision, behaviors. But a lot of my time was spent in either focus groups with managers, frontline staff, or interviews with executives. And one of the things that came up often was how frustrating work was for people, or how upsetting it could be, or how demoralizing it could be. And I find that out in these focus groups, and people would be very honest. They'd give great candor. If you give them a safe space, people will be honest about both the good and the bad of work. And over 16 years, I heard some really tough stories to hear, to be honest with you. And it kind of broke my heart at times that, people are spending 40 hours a week, if they're lucky, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, 45 years of a career. We're spending 100,000 hours or so of our lives at work. And to be that miserable, it impacts us. And it impacts us in ways that a lot of us don't realize, or we think conceptually. But there are a lot of studies that have come out about the impact of a person's personality, impact of a person's health, person's well-being, all coming from their work. And it's not just about how much money you make, but the experience that you have. The other thing that I found in that time was how little executives actually knew was happening with those frontline employees. So for me, when I decided to go out on my own almost 3 years ago, that was where my passion lied. Bringing that disconnect together so that executives can make decisions that don't make people miserable. Essentially that. I want people to be happier at work. And I don't mean that like kumbaya, everyone should be happy, but not miserable. I saw a study recently that here in Toronto for office workers, 50% of office workers are disengaged. 50% are, and not just not engaged, but disengaged. That's distressing because that impacts people not just in the 8-10 hours a day they're at work, but it impacts how you show up at home, how well you sleep, life expectancy. A lot of health outcomes, mental health and physical health outcomes, derive from the way we're treated at work. A lot, and it was something that was distressing for me, and that's why I made the vision of my company to make the world a better place to work, because it's not. Most places are okay at best. There are reasons why over the last 20 years, despite HR's focus on engagement, if you look at the Gallup survey, it hasn't gone up. It's been in the low 30s, give or take, for many years, and it hasn't changed. And that's why I love doing what I do, talking to people, understanding what makes them tick, because what makes them tick isn't necessarily what leaders think makes them tick.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yes,
sharing
Marissa,
that.
you're absolutely right. I mean, it goes even beyond that, because it's a lot of time at work to not just not be happy, but to be miserable, to dread going to work. The Sunday scaries are a very real thing. A couple of years ago, when I was active on LinkedIn, I posted about the Sunday scaries, and I posted about how it drives me and how I want to help change that. And there were numerous people whose responses were, I thought that's just a part of work. I thought that's just how it is. You just hate Sunday nights. And they don't know that it's even possible. And I'm not talking people who are a couple of years into their career. I'm talking about some people who are in their 50s, their 60s, who've been around, who've been working for many years, and they, for 30 years, every Sunday night, they've been miserable, because that's just what we've come to expect. Hi, Jeffrey.
Whew. Y'all, this is why Gil is amazing, right? Like, coming out the gate. Thank you, though. But isn't it disappointing? And you and I have had this conversation on multiple occasions because of the work that we do, both separately and together, around the fact that these statistics are getting worse. They're not improving. And after all the work and all the engagement and all of the efforts that people have put in, we're still in this place, and actually we're going the wrong direction. It's worse. It's worse.
It's worse because there remains that disconnect between leadership and employees. I mean, I haven't actually had a chance to look into it, but with that 50% stat, I would not be surprised if it's tightly connected to the fact that over the last 6 to 8 months, many, many companies in Toronto have forced people to come back into the office at least a few days a week. And I can't speak for everywhere else. And sorry. Oh, yeah, Nancy, I 100% agree. It should not be the norm. It should be an anomaly. It should be a rarity. I lost my point now.
You were talking about that. We're going to talk about why this works and all those things, but you're in my head again. This kind of gap between leadership and employees, and what you think it's ascribed to.
Oh, yes. So if you look at the surveys a year and a half ago, many of the surveys showed that executives were far more eager to get back into the office than employees were. They were far more eager to get back to the office than employees were. And now when you drag them back to the office, I can't speak for other cities, but in Toronto, it's an average commute time of an hour. Easily an average commute time of an hour. Many people have an hour and a half up to 2 hours every single day. As well, because traffic is so terrible in Toronto, that's either sitting in traffic for an hour and a half, 2 hours, or sitting on public transit, which in the age of COVID brings people greater feels. Thank you, Marissa, for bringing that out. Leading by personal preference versus purpose. So one of the things I talked about a lot when those surveys were coming out for executives was that they wanted to go back to the office, because what were they picturing? A nice, cushy corner office, a door to close themselves off from everybody else, a quiet space where they can do what they want. Whereas everybody else is sitting in their cubicles or in their open concept spaces, which have been proven to be more than a little bit problematic. So it's easy to say, oh, I want to get back to the office. And butts in the seat for the states of butts in the seat is just silly. But that's because those leaders never learned how to lead any other way. Lead, I would put in quotation marks there. But that's what they know. That's what they think managing is you have to be looking over a person's shoulder. You don't know they're working unless you see they're actually present, which is not a good, productive way of doing things. Part of the problem, in my opinion, was that leading into all of this is that there wasn't a hard and fast way of going remote or going hybrid. So a lot of people did it badly and then blamed remote and hybrid on it being bad. It's not the problem. When you expect your employees to call you every half hour as a manager, when you put monitoring systems on their computers, and then you complain that they're not happy or they're not productive, or you dictate their hours when one of the benefits of remote work is that flexibility, when you expect them to be working at all hours because, hey, they're remote now, they have nothing else to do, and then you complain because they're not productive, shooting yourself in the foot. It's that Eric Andre meme. Why would workers do this? I don't know if you're familiar with that Eric Andre meme, but he's the he's a talk show host who shoots somebody and says like, and then blames somebody else why it happened. But in any event, that's what happens with leadership.
Wow. Oh, so much that you just unpacked for us here. And this piece around bringing people back to work and how we do it and whether or not it was strategic, part of that is a symptom of issues that were going on before. So there's probably a lack of communication in the environment prior. There probably wasn't a good strategy prior. We probably didn't care enough about our employees prior. We weren't leaning into our mission, vision, values, our purpose. All of those things were not going to go away. In fact, they were magnified and have been through this process, especially if you're not going to treat folks like adults and expect them to be there. But that's the environment that a lot of folks are frankly in, and just bringing them back to the office or saying, because we know that you allegedly will be more engaged if we give you this flexibility, but maybe we don't buy into that, but we're going to do it, but we're still going to monitor you. That's counterproductive. It's counterintuitive. And I think a lot of people are learning that the hard way. And that's why we're seeing the Great Recession or the Great Resignation, all of these things. And people are struggling with retention. So some people are unfortunately learning these lessons the hard way.
They are. And I love your point that this didn't start in March of 2020. This is the situation we're in isn't because COVID happened or isn't because people were forced to go remote. There were these problems that existed beforehand. Inability to communicate. And one of the biggest problems I see when it comes to leadership is a lack of intent. That is why they didn't know what to do in terms of communication, how to lead people, how to build teams, all of that, because they weren't intentional about it in the first place. They just allowed it to happen. So it was whatever they were willing to accept, as opposed to being intentional about this is how we communicate. This is why we communicate. Right? One of the things that I found a lot of companies who were forced to go remote complained about, it's like, oh, we're missing some of these conversations. Okay, break it down. What were the conversations that you're missing? How do you find them again? How do you create those opportunities? Instead of just sitting there and complaining, and instead of just saying, oh, we'll make up for it by having an hour-long yoga session each week, because that's what they thought engagement was, instead of understanding how you led them through that period was going to determine how they behaved then and how they behaved later. Because one of the things that a lot of companies don't realize they're facing, and I think that plays into that 50% stat, is the change in expectations over the last couple of years. Expectations, and I've been saying this for years, expectations are at the heart of employee experience, expectations and perceptions. That's why two different people, similar people, could have a very different experience somewhere because they were expecting something different. If I worked for 10 years at a company that was abusive and disrespectful, but my frog was boiled and I expected abuse and disrespect, and then my peer worked at 10 years at a company that was amazing. She worked for Tiffany for 10 years and it was amazing. And she learned respect and psychological safety and all of those things. And we went into an environment that was mediocre. I would think it was great and my peer would think it was terrible. It's like I think back to that. There was a science center here in Toronto with an experiment that you put your hands in one hand in hot water, one hand in cold water, and then you put them both in the same water. And one feel the one that was in cold water feels hot, and the one that was in hot water feels cold because it's all about relative. That's how expectations are built. Over a year and a half of working from home or however working remotely, expectations were built. There has to be a give back for employees that if we're going to expect you to take an hour and a half on public transit each way to get here, there needs to be some sort of draw to it. Humans want to know why we're doing things as much as leaders don't actually want to tell people. Humans want to know why we're doing things. If I'm being dragged into the office, if I think I'm being dragged into the office because you don't know how to lead, that's a disengaging behavior. That's encouraging me to go somewhere else. I'm not going to spend an hour and a half on the subway each day or on the GO train each day because you don't know how to lead me when I'm sitting at home, even though I've been productive and the company's been running for a year and a half.
Yeah. This is definitely resonating. Thank you all for sharing your comments. Keep them coming, send us questions. Karen is saying one thing that's annoying to her is this time trade, right? It's like the monitoring tools. Why can't I complete this in the 4 to 5 hours and do it effectively? Instead of burning people out, burnout is at an all-time high right now. And our leaders are burnt out too. So effectively, they're doing the things that are burning themselves out. You taking all this extra time to be micromanaging people instead of setting vision, which would help with engagement, which would help with retention. And so, yeah. Do you have thoughts to add to what Karen shared too?
I love what Karen added. No, please keep it up there because
Yeah.
I want to speak to this point because I think she's dead on about this, because one of the things about remote work, when done well, is you're measuring outcomes, you're measuring results, not time put in. So if I can get it done in 4 hours, I deserve to have the rest of my day because my peer is doing it in 8 hours and we're both getting paid the same amount. Why should I be getting paid the same amount as my peer if I'm doing twice their work? If I'm twice as efficient, whereas the benefit of remote work is I am being paid for this amount of work. If I can do that work in 20 hours, great, go have a life. If I have to take 45 hours, I have to take 45 hours. That's the way it is. So the idea of punishing somebody for being efficient, it reminds me of the locksmith's dilemma, which is this story about a locksmith who complained because early in their career, they would go somewhere and they would be paid a certain amount to open up a lock or whatever, a broken lock, and it would take them a certain amount of time. But as they got better at it, it took a shorter and shorter amount of time, which meant that the person receiving the service didn't see the same value. They didn't believe there was the same value. Why did it take you so short? Why did it take you so short? Or the other one, this is a joke I got from my dad many years ago, is there's a gentleman working in a factory. He hits the age of 65 and he's forced into retirement because for financial reasons, they don't want to pay him so much, all of this. So they force him into retirement. A couple of months later, the machine he always worked on breaks down. They're like, oh, it was that guy. He always fixes it. We don't know how to fix it. They're like, okay, we'll call him in. We'll contract him. It shouldn't take long. He comes in, he looks around, examines it, takes a wrench and whacks one of the pipes. Immediately, the machine starts working again. So everybody's like, awesome, thank you, send me your bill. Sends the CEO the bill, $20,000. CEO's like, you were here for 2 minutes, you had one whack of the wrench and you left. How is it $20,000? The guy goes, oh, you want my itemized bill? Not a problem. Whacking the wrench, $100, 40 years of experience to know exactly where to whack, $19,900. That's the value of it. And in-person work, in-person management that goes in that path doesn't understand exactly what Karen's saying. We want to motivate efficiency. We want to motivate productivity. We don't want to motivate, well, I'll put in my 8 hours and walk on. That's not good for the individual. That's not going to make them feel good at the end of the day. and that's not going to be productive for the company. Because one of the things that, if you remember before I said, I'm like, I'm not about people being happy just for the sake of happy kumbaya. I love it. Don't get me wrong. But there's another element to it. Productive people are happy. When you, at the end of the day, can look back and say, I did the work I needed to do. I did it effectively. I did it efficiently. I had autonomy. I have a purpose in it. I am a master of my craft. They're able to walk away happily. There are other elements of it too, but that's a piece of it. And now if you are working 4 to 5, doing your work in 4 to 5 hours, and then adding another person's workload because you got to be there for 3 hours, well, that becomes a sign to look elsewhere.
Hear, 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 hear. Thank you. Yes, and thank you, Karen, for sharing that. I love how Marissa's saying the expectations have shifted and people are operating in their individual and collective power to drive change. That is a concise but impactful statement there. And it's so true.
100%.
Yeah. People, these organizations have to move with, some have been doing, taking a pulse. That's some of the work we've been doing together, and really looking at what are those drivers? What is it that people expect? What do they need? And it's back to what you said about the why. Why are we doing it? If you don't ask that and you don't know the answer, then don't do it, because people are going to ask you why. And if you can't articulate why you're doing it, then you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So you can't get mad when people start to ask you.
Or if you can't comfortably share why you're doing it, maybe reconsider that. Maybe if you're going to have to tell little fibs, maybe you should be reconsidering making that decision in the first place of why you're doing that. Because I understand there isn't 100% transparency in an organization, but the closer you can get to that, especially around your people decisions, people will be happier. They'd rather somebody say, look, I'm doing this bad thing, but here's why and here's how it connects, as opposed to here's a bad thing and deal with it. And this, because this is the direction of the company or whatever it might be. But this is also why, I know I've been talking a lot and you've been interviewing me and all that, but speaking to our partnership though, this is why it works is that, well, I, in this specific case, might be more expressive about it. Tiffany shares these passions with me. That's the thing of one of the things that I love working with CEPHR is that when I'm trying to explain things, we're coming from the same angle on that, of what we're trying to accomplish. We want to make great workplaces. We want them to be great. We want them to grow, to be productive, to be profitable, all of those things, but not at the expense of anybody, not on the backs of anybody, but bringing people in. And one thing also that I didn't mention earlier that in what drives me is that when I was in those meetings, in those focus groups, hearing about people's frustrations, upset, all of that, most times they were people from marginalized communities. Most times it wasn't people from the dominant group, whatever it might be within that organization. Because that's one of the things I find fascinating about the diversity element of DEI is diversity is context specific. Because when I would work with a tech company, well, just finding women, a lot of the times, unfortunately for them, is diversity because historically they don't know how to manage women being male dominant, which doesn't become very inclusive or belonging for the women they do bring in. But that was one of the things that I found is that the people who need the greatest support are the ones who are marginalized within an organization. Within a specific context, those are the ones who more often than not need more of the support. Because the reality is that broadly speaking, in most organizations, most people have sort of a central experience. It regresses to the means. As I think of a lot of things sort of as that standard deviation curve kind of thing. And so most people have that. But more often than not, the people who are having the worst experiences are those who are unfortunately least thought about by the organization and least thought about often by society.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, that those are the values that we work within when we're partnered up, and that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, even if it's not specific in that lane of what we're working on for the engagement, it is always at the forefront. People are always at the forefront. And it's one of the things that I really, really appreciate about you, and why I was like, oh, I need Gil for this project. Like, let me see if Gil will come in and partner with me on this, because it's part of that is in that what's missing from the organizations at times is the diversity of thought, the diversity of perspectives, and pulling those in versus I'm the leader and this is what I say. And so this must be right. Getting the right people around the table, helping to support bringing folks up who are marginalized, folks who are your people of color, women, and just pulling in all that diversity, because so often this is done poorly because we look at what we can see visibly on the outside. Well, what about other folks who may have a disability that hasn't been disclosed? How do you know? And how do you know that the way that you're seeking to even get that information is resonating, and that maybe they don't need some type of accommodation? How do you know if women aren't advancing if you're not looking at all that? So it's using your data as well. And I love that we blend all of those things, but with different lenses and perspectives of each other that we appreciate and bring to our work. So I appreciate you bringing in the DEIB piece.
Well, we need to be intentional about that. I mean, part of the problem is historically is we look at the mass. I mentioned that fuzzy concept of engagement earlier. Well, engagement doesn't mean very much. So say we're looking for a number of 80% of people are engaged, right? Yeah, but if 80% of the people are engaged, but it's all one specific group, in the 20% of the people who are disengaged are all another specific group, we can't be happy with the 80%. Even if that was our target, that's the problem of not looking through these things through multiple lenses, because historically, all we would look at before we considered these issues, historically, all we would look at is, oh, what does the group think? Well, 80%. Oh, good number. We're happy with that. What do we do to keep it at that number? Because that's higher than industry standard, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And they'd leave it there, not understanding that there's a different lens with which to understand that, you might be making all of a certain group happy, but if you're making other people miserable, that isn't productive. That isn't moving forward as a society, as an organization. That is, again, moving forward on people's backs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but on people's backs who could least afford it in the first place.
Right. And accessibility is a huge piece of that. That's a huge piece to make sure that, because equity is not equality. They're not the same thing. And different people need different things. And I think, we're seeing this trend where it is moving more towards where people are finally making that differentiation. I'm not a parent. Someone who's a parent is going to have different needs than I do. There are various factors that make us uniquely us, and that employers will do themselves a lot of favors by embracing. And so I think a lot of that is related to even the work we do, unless there's anything else you want to add on partnerships or why you chose to work with CEPHR. Anything else you would add there?
Why? I do want to speak a little bit more on that, because I'm picky. I'm picky. I like a fair number of people, but I wouldn't necessarily partner with them or want to represent them under their brand or have them represent me under my brand or anything like that. Because I think there's an element of values and heart of what we're trying to accomplish. What we're trying to accomplish around building people up, building workplaces up, making workplaces places where everybody can go, not feel the Sunday scaries, feel like they belong, be comfortably themselves, not feel like they have to be somebody different at work, not have to pretend, not have to change tone or anything like that, but just be comfortably themselves at work. That's where you're ultimately trying to go. Why the partnership also works, though, is that we each have, I don't want to say gaps, but like we each have areas where we fill in for each other.
Mhm.
That's the thing about it, is it's not like we're both going in the same direction from the same point. We're both going the same direction from a very different point. People who've worked with me know I am not HR. I never claim to be HR. I never say I am HR. I respect it. I appreciate it. It's not the way I see the world. It's not the angle with which I see the world or the lens. But I appreciate that you do. That's the thing about it, because I wouldn't want to partner with somebody who's like, well, yeah, we're both going in the same direction, but we both do the exact same thing. There's no, to use everybody's favorite word, synergy there. It isn't there. Whereas for you, I get to know that your intent is good. If you're bringing something up around a client, it's not because you're doing something underhanded or you're trying to make more money off them or something like that. It's you're doing it because you're trying to make the experience better for everybody. You're trying to make it a better company. That makes it easier for me. I don't have to worry about stuff. I don't have to like think about stuff. Like when you bring things up, it's okay. And I take it completely at face value because we've gotten to know each other for so long. And so that there's that trust there. And I think that is an important factor for us in terms of our partnership. For me, is that if I didn't trust you implicitly like that, I couldn't walk into these meetings the way I do, especially when sometimes we walk in with, we only had 5 minutes to prepare for that specific meeting. And it's like, I'm like, I know she's going to knock it out of the park anyway, so I don't have to worry about it. That is an element for me that is so valuable, because having worked with so many different people in my life, and like sometimes don't know what they're going to say. You don't know where they're going with something. And with you, it's like, okay, I may not know exactly where she's going with it because I don't have her experience or perspective or anything like that. But I trust it's a direction that, I'd appreciate. And if I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, we could talk about it or whatever, which is also powerful. But I have that trust, or I'm not too concerned, like, where's she going with this? Or I'm not sitting there like, trying to hide one of those in a meeting.
I appreciate that. And trust is integral to any relationship, right? But one of the things that, on top of everything that you shared, and I echo that back, we oftentimes are arriving, you said, we're not starting at the same point necessarily, but that's because of the diversity of our experiences and the lens, and that's the beautiful mix that we get to make up together. And I think our clients benefit from that even more, and being able to really understand that. And it's healthy for a partnership to have trust, but we're not always gonna agree. And sometimes you'll be like, I want to talk about that. Or I'm like, wait, I have another perspective to offer. And we balance each other out well that way, and are able to say, help me understand. And so one of the things that I would say for anybody watching is, whether it's a partnership, a friendship, a colleague, a leader you report to, or if you are a leader and you have direct reports, to make sure that you are clarifying what you mean what you say. And that is one of the things on top of trust that makes our partnership so strong, because we seek that extra clarity. We don't make assumptions about what the other person may be saying. If we're unclear, we're going to say it. We're going to ask, and we're going to make sure we're aligned in the right direction, because that doesn't just help us in the business and in the partnership that we have, it helps the clients, and it's the right thing to do. And it's one of my favorite things about working with you. I never have this, why is he asking me that? Right? Like you said, like, we know that the intent is pure, and that it's because we want to do the very best work for people, because we're responsible for helping guide as consultants. That's our job, to help guide our clients. They don't have all the answers. We don't always either. But the stronger we are together, and then the more intentional, the better it is in deliverables and outcomes for our clients.
Absolutely. I would also add one thing I think that's important for how our partnership works, is that when we work together, we're able to put the ego aside. That the goal is the outcome for the client. Because look, we're both relatively knowledgeable people. We both got opinions and some ego in us, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that when we come together, it's never about that. It's always of you and I both sitting on the same side of the table, pointing in the same direction of just trying to do great work for the client. It's not about who gets credit. It's not about, a person standing in front or any stepping on any toes or anything like that. It's not about us individually. It's just we're working collectively of that's our goal. We're working on that for the client, and it's not, any personal ego stuff can come later on and can come from success as a team in this scenario, but we're able to put that past us and just be like, yeah, let's get shit done.
Yeah, we do get shit done. Hopefully people are okay with this, right? But this is, part of that. Somebody mentioned in the chat too, transparency and authenticity. And that is so important. We need to be able to have that. I was scrolling up to see who it was. Trying to do it quickly. It didn't work. We have to also be okay with like, that didn't work. Let's try again, right? I love that we can share this value of agility as well. What do you think we should do? Let's introduce that. And we try on different things, and we try those on with our clients as well and say, if this doesn't fit, we'll shift it up and we'll make that work. In fact, we had that happen recently, like, oh, okay. Sometimes clients change their minds, right? And they want something different, or it's a lot for them to absorb. We have to break that down. And so we had that experience recently, and we're working on that now to kind of resituate some things, and we'll bring it back to the client, because it's not about, if you're an entrepreneur, you're a consultant, you're a coach, it's not about you. They came to you for your expertise, but it's about them, or they wouldn't be there. And so that is a key piece of, why this works and how you build these intentional, powerful partnerships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Do you have a favorite project of ours that you want to talk about?
Favorite project?
It doesn't have to be a favorite, I guess, but
I'm not sure. I mean, for me, I think the clients, for each of them, I think makes it extra special, because one of the things for me that I've determined over the years when working with different clients is what my ideal client is. And my ideal client are leaders who get that they don't know everything and need support to achieve what they're trying to achieve, but their goals are human-centric. Look, nobody's perfect. Nobody comes into leadership and being an executive knowing everything, right? But the ability to say, my company is not perfect. I'm probably responsible for that as the leader. And what can we do to adjust, to improve? That's what I've loved with each of our clients that we worked with, other than maybe one of them. I wasn't close enough to the leadership team to know. It wasn't about that.
Yeah.
It wasn't any negative. It was just I couldn't claim one way or the other. But that's what for me is so powerful, is helping people learn, who want to do better, who want to make better decisions. Like I said earlier, that's what ultimately I want to see happen in my clients, is we learn from the people and we help the leaders make better decisions that will both improve the business, improve profitability, safety, retention, all of those things, while also making for a better experience for employees. But the thing about making a better experience for employees is extremely context specific, almost actually down to the individual pretty much. Because every group has their own needs. Every cohort of employees, even within divisions, have their own needs, right? Like you mentioned, some people have kids, some people don't. Some people have aging parents who live with them, or aging parents that they have to take care of, or whatever it might be. Some people have, attention issues. Some people maybe have other ability issues. It's about supporting them and about finding that support. But clients for me that you and I have been working on, they're the ones who aren't saying, come into the office because I think you need to be in the office, but they're trying to understand what that looks like from the employee's perspective. Because if you have a group of employees who live in Toronto and you're expecting them to come back to the office and they've all got an hour plus commute, you have to figure that out experientially, as opposed to if you live in a smaller town and everybody's got maybe a 5-minute commute, maybe 7.5 if you miss the one light. That's a different element of experience, but they'll have their own things they have to worry about. That's what leaders need to understand. The answer is not in some thought leader's book. The answer isn't in some other executives or some FANG executive's book or masterclass or something like that. The answer is most of them exist within your organization. It's amazing what people know if you just ask them. But the iceberg of ignorance is real. And we like to find clients who are trying to break it down.
Yeah. And it's fun to explore that together and to help them kind of along the way. And then they get to learn and we all grow together, which is cool. Whether it's, we're figuring out what are the service profiles for folks or what's making a team, what's really the mix of this team and where are they stuck? What are the barriers that are in the way, and having them be a part of identifying that in the process, or we're doing a survey, or we're customizing trainings around what clients want and what they're experiencing in the workplace, that we can help alleviate some of that and support their teams. There's so much great stuff that we get to do together, and I'm super excited for what's next. So I guess that brings me to a question of like, what do you hope is next for us, or what do you think would make this strong? What do you want to build toward next?
Do you mind if I speak to the last point before I get
Please
to this
do.
one?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned variety. You mentioned a variety of different things we've done together. And I want to highlight how much I love that, because what that shows is that we meet clients where they are with what they need. Right? Employee experience is everything from the chair you sit on, the email app you use, your boss, your peers, the CEO's behavior. All of these things factor in. But like I said, each group is different and each group is somewhere else. So we can't go in and say, well, this is what you need to change with employee experience without understanding what that unique organization, the problem they have. So like you mentioned, for one example, it was about disseminating and understanding what does service culture mean to them. For one company, it was about understanding what is safe spaces. How do you behavioralize safe spaces? Or how do you survey around different issues because they were really early and just trying to understand an issue? And that kind of diversity allows us to work with the clients on what they need, not coming in with, we've got all our watches in our coat and be like, which one do you want? We're coming in and saying, hey, look, you've got your own unique issues. Let's not give them the answer of what we think we should be selling this week or, what's most profitable, but, oh, you need this group trained? Let's train that group. Oh, you need to understand psychological safety? Let's understand that. Let's meet them where they are. The future of this is just more. That's really because I try to, think sometimes and try to be a little bit of Zen of like life is about the journey, not the destination. So because I've enjoyed so much of working with you over the last 6 months or so, that's really my focus, is just finding more and more ways that I get to have to message you 10 times a day.
It is fun. I think, yeah, we should maybe talk about communication too. I think we brought it up, but we have so many different ways that we can communicate. Like even this morning, I was like, should I send a message on Slack? Should we do WhatsApp? Should I text? Like, how do we email? And you have to be open to that. So just as we model what we're telling our clients, and we have to be responsive to each other. We have to be there. If it's like, hey, do you have 10 minutes? I need to talk about something. Or do you want to, maybe we hadn't talked about a pre-meeting to our client thing. It was like, I feel better if I talk about this. And so the fact that we're both accessible for each other and supporting so that we make sure our communication stays on point, that will make and break any relationship, right? And so the fact that we have that, we have multiple modes of being able to do that, is something that I celebrate too. Maybe we're sending a gift the one day. Is it GIF? Is it GIF? Who knows? The argument continues.
No, it's GIF. It's
Okay.
GIF. I'm not accepting
we had this conversation.
It's not graphical interface. It's graphical interface. It's GIF. I don't care what the creator says. It's GIF.
I hear
I'll be
you in my
dogmatic
head
about that one, but I do want to point something out though, because you mentioned about our different modes of communication, but I think there's even more to that. It's about, we were intentional and open about figuring out communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to use an example of this because, one of the things you learn in business school is about forming, norming, storming, and performing, or storming, norming, and performing, right? And it's about being able to get to a fully communicative place. Mm-hmm. Clarifying expectations, clarifying understandings. And so I want to use the example of around communicating off hours, because this is something that I'm the type of person, I like to have my 8 to 5 or so, and I check out, and that's what's good for my mental health. Tiffany is good in terms of working all hours because she is a machine, and I respect her for that as well. But there came a point where we had to talk about that. There came a point where what's funny is with us, usually when we talk about things, it's the person who thinks they're doing wrong bringing it up. Because the intent is so positive between us, I was never upset or ever anything about, you messaging me after hours or anything like that. You just wanted to make sure that I knew your intent wasn't, I needed to respond immediately. So you were being clear. You were being transparent about how you wanted to communicate, while also being completely respectful of my individuality, of how I like to work. Like, I know not to book you for 9 o'clock meetings. I know how you like to work. You know how I like to work. And I just want to say that it's not just about having these different tools. And this is what I say to HR people all the time. It's not about the tools, it's how you use them. Mm-hmm. You could have 10 different companies with the same tool, but how you use them is different. For example, Slack people have complained about it because it keeps you on potentially at all hours. However, if you make rules within your company of no Slacks after this time, or, you set yourself to whatever it might be, whatever's authentic to that company, we have to find what's authentic to us. Mm-hmm. And being intentional at it. And you talk about this regularly of, we have to model what we try to espouse for our clients, talking about psychological safety, having an uncomfortable conversation, right? Disagreeing with each other, but leaning into it, because that discomfort allows us to get to a better place, as opposed to being like, oh, well, I'm just going to back away and hope it improves, which is the dysfunction of many individuals and many organizations, of how we get so many miserable people at work. It all comes full circle.
It does. It does. Thank you for sharing. I love that you shared a relevant example, because I've had these conversations with other people, and where it's kind of broken down, or, I think some people, it makes a decision. It's important for them, especially for those of us who may be in more of a solo, we don't have employees, but we partner with people, right? To make those decisions. And part of why I wanted to share this and highlight you and start this little mini series was because if you're exploring potentially partnering with somebody, whether it's a tech partner, I've SaaS partners, I have those as well. And I have strategic, amazing partners like Gil, who partner on projects and clients, and we're friends. Those things become important. You have to identify for yourself what your values are and what you're looking for in that person. Why, right? We talked about the why you even want to partner in the first place, not just because, hey, that sounds good, or that's what people are doing, the cool kids, and this is how somebody else said that they grew their business. You have to want that for yourself, and the other person has to be there alongside you in the journey, and the communication and the trust have to be there, the psychological safety. Those have to be foundational, or it's not going to work. So I appreciate that we were able to share that. Any final tips before I close us out? And thank you, Karen, for the compliment of our partnership. We really appreciate that. We think it's pretty great too. And I'm looking forward to our future and continuing to build as well, Gil.
I think just one last thing on it relates to that trust issue is when finding a partner, find somebody who has your best interests in mind. Find somebody who's looking out for you. That's the thing is I know one of the reasons why I trust you is that I know you're looking out for me. You're looking if there's something, that you think I'm overworking or anything like that, you're looking out for me as you know that I'm also looking out for you. So we both have this little safety net of each other to support each other instead of, again, to that trust. If I didn't think you were 100% looking out for me, why is she giving me that task? Why is she asking me that question? Whatever it might be. Whereas the intent is purely like, no, I want Tiffany to kick ass and take names and soar, and I want everybody to know how amazing she is. That's on my end of it, and I get the feeling from you that that's how you act toward and feel towards me. That makes the other stuff so just the uncomfortable conversations aren't as uncomfortable. The what about ideas, right? Of bouncing ideas off each other, of creativity, just allows for, what? I can say sometimes, I think this might be a stupid idea, but here you go. And you might either say, you know what, that's not the best idea, or actually, it's not such a stupid idea. But I have the comfort of knowing, okay, she's not going to think I'm an idiot because I thought of this idea. She understood the context of why I brought it up or anything like that. And so for me, finding somebody who's looking out for you, who's really looking out for you the way we're looking out for each other, I think that's key. And I mean, we've had conversations on the topic where we were looking out for each other, where we didn't always think the other person was looking out for themselves enough, right? Where we were, being a supporter of, look, I need you to look out for you too, because you deserve it.
We talk about that a lot. And it's so meaningful. It's so meaningful. And I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for sharing your time and talents. And I can't wait till I think in a couple of days we're meeting again. So it's always fun and having fun at work, right? That's what we want for our clients and their teams. And we do a lot of that too. We work very hard. And it would be a shame if we didn't celebrate all of the things that we're doing and the impact that we're having, because it's part of why we do what we do. And just thank you all for joining in to my second LinkedIn Live and my amazing first inaugural episode of the Power of Intentional Partnerships with Gil Cohen here. Gil, thanks for all that you bring to CEPHR. I'm looking forward to our future and the impact. So we hope this has been impactful for you. We want you to share any further thoughts or questions. Thanks for joining and sharing already your thoughts and questions. You can follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we're both most active. And you can expect to see more of our work being highlighted. We're working on some other fun stuff and more ways to continue highlighting that and building together. So if any of what we shared about our work that we do resonates with you, it sounds like something you may want or you may want to bring to your organization, or someone else who may need that, please reach out to us. We would love that. If you joined us later, you want to rewatch all of parts of this, or you had to head off to a meeting, feel free. We are, again, streaming live to LinkedIn and to YouTube, so you can catch it there. And stay tuned for future guests on this little mini series. And thank you, Gil, again. I'm so excited that we got to kick off right with you. So thank you so much for being here. Take care, everybody.
Thanks to Karen and Nancy. Appreciate the comments.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Have a great day.